that today, 117 people are going to die by suicide. And our ability to determine who will die by suicide has not improved in the past 50 years. And 25% of those with eating disorders will attempt suicide at some point in their life. These facts illustrate several points. One, clearly suicide is a prevalent and unsolved problem. And there seems to be some sort of association between eating disorders and suicidal thoughts and behaviors, or suicidality. Let me help illuminate these facts, though, by sharing a personal story. As mentioned before, I spent 2 years working at a residential eating disorder facility where I had the incredible experience of watching these strong, determined women fight back against their mental illness. Unfortunately, one of these young women felt so hopeless about her situation, she attempted suicide. And as someone who had interacted with her just hours prior, I felt completely lost and so confused. And beyond the despair that this young woman was feeling, her clinicians, her family members, her friends, the other patients were totally heartbroken because they didn't know how to best support her or to prevent this from happening again. Because the problem is, we don't know a lot about the relationship between eating disorders and suicidality. So how are we going to treat something or prevent something if we don't know what's causing what? That would be like showing up to a blazing house fire with the potential consequence of death and not knowing if we should be aiming the water at the flames or the smoke. But there is hope. You see, by investigating the relationship over time, or the longitudinal relationship between eating disorders and suicidality, we can begin to look at this relationship the right way, and we can identify better treatments to reduce suffering. Me personally, I'm interested in suicidal thoughts, or suicidal ideation. And so my thesis looked at the longitudinal relationship between eating disorder symptoms and suicidality. Specifically, I was interested to see if someone was engaging in eating disorder symptoms at one time point, if we would see an increase in thoughts about suicide a week later. I also looked at it the other way, where I was curious to see if someone was having thoughts about suicide, we would see an increase in eating disorder symptoms at the following week. And then finally, I investigated if there was a bidirectional relationship, where these two variables were influencing each other equally. So the results from my thesis highlighted two crucial points. One, I found that thoughts about suicide predicted the engagement of eating disorder symptoms at the following time point. I also found that within my sample of eating disorder patients, 50% of them endorse having thoughts about suicide. So that sounds like something we should be evaluating. However, research indicates that healthcare providers are only evaluating for thoughts about suicide and suicidal behavior in less than 50% of their eating disorder patient cases. So that is something that needs to change. Going back to my finding that suicidal ideation can predict future engagement in eating disorder symptoms, I think this highlights a novel reason for why relapse rates might be so high in these individuals. So imagine that you're having really scary thoughts about suicide and you want to avoid them. And let's say that you avoid them by engaging in eating disorder symptoms. Well, if you go to treatment for your eating disorder, that treatment's going to be really great at targeting the eating disorder symptoms, but it's not getting at the flames of this problem. And so someone who then is recovering from their eating disorder, if they have an increase in these scary thoughts about suicide, they're going to be more likely to revert back to their eating disorder symptoms as a way to cope with that experience. My research and other research so far has only allowed us to have a small peek into this relationship so far. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But my hope is that you guys today, from my talk, have learned that there's a problem here and there's a problem that needs attention. And with that attention, we can help develop a deeper empathy for these individuals, secure more funding, and develop better treatment. So hopefully, as a society, we can help these individuals that are being consumed by this fire by identifying what are ignore the flames of the situation and using the best treatment to target those flames.